John McMillan, and I was the first settler in this area. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about my adventure. That's kind of the way I'd like to look at it. I was born in 1824 in Ohio, and when I was 10 years old, maybe about like that, I took a job as a cabin boy on a steamer on the Ohio River. It seems young, but that was the way we did things then. And so I got to see a lot of developing towns along the river, and things were really changing in this country at that point, and that was the West in 1824. Later I moved on to Rockford, Illinois, and they wanted to put me in school, and I didn't really cater that too much, but I did do one term in school and decided it wasn't for me. I bought a little cart and started working as a peddler. So I'd had all kinds of goods that I could sell, went door to door with that cart. Should have had better galluses today. Went door to door with the cart, sold all kinds of different things, and took in, now I can start talking. Took in barter as well as cash, and did pretty well. The big thing that happened to me in Rockford was I met the love of my life, Sarah. We were married for a long time. And we continued to live in Rockford. Her family was there. Until we started hearing stories about Iowa. Iowa became a state in 1848, and I came out here in 1852 just to look around and see what was happening. So I liked what I saw and went back and decided, Sarah and I decided we'd move here to this area. The next year, 1853, I came out here. I hired two fellas, Jamie Jenkinson and Paulie Warner. Paulie was my brother-in-law, and they agreed to come out and help me set things up, build a cabin and so forth. So we came out in 1853, built a small cabin, just room for a couple people, and then started work on putting the walls up for a larger cabin. It got cold. I went back to the Butte to get provisions for the winter. Came back out here, and the boys wintered over, and I went back to Rockford to be with Sarah and our children. At that point we had two young boys and a daughter who was just a toddler. Well, we stayed in Rochester, Rockford, for a time. The next spring, in April, packed up the wagon and everything we had and came out here. Jenkinson and Hawley had made it through the winter. There's a lot of stories about that, but not all of them are true. You'll have to decide for yourself. Anyway, we finished building the larger cabin so that we had a place for the family, and it was a good place to be. There were two settlers. I was the first to buy land in this area, but Dickinson and Hewitt were in Clear Lake, around the lake, and the three of us went buffalo hunting. We'd go out, we shot a load of buffalo, brought back the hides and meat, and we were able to tan those hides and tack them up on our cabins. It looked like we were in a hairy cave from the outside, but it was well worth it because we could take those hides back to the Butte, and a wagon load of hides would net about $1,500. Came back and I set up a general store here. So it was the first store in Mason City as well, and it was in the area that's now the plaza to the north of Southbridge Mall. So it's still the commercial center of town. That was the very first at that point. In 1855, we had our first election. and the election was held in my store. I pulled down a cigar box from the shelf, emptied it out, and we're going to use that for the ballot box. Well, the guy who was here to certify the election said, nope, it's got to have a lock on it. You know how the state is these days. So we've talked about all kinds of things, maybe pasting the lid shut, nailing it to a bench, but finally I just took a chain and a big old padlock, about the size of that cigar box, wrapped it up and chained it onto a table. He said, yep, that'll do. So we had 60 voters that day, the very first election in Sarasota County. 60 voters. That meant there were 60 men who voted. These people are running around here with this vote for women. I don't know where that came from. That came later. But anyway, things were starting to move along. And in 1857, we applied for the first post office. And the post office, we got our mail through Dubuque. Actually, at that point, Jamie Jenkinson would go back to Dubuque, bring the mail that was waiting there for the residents here. And that worked reasonably well until one time he came back and he was really tired. He threw the mail in a little bucket, went in, went to sleep, and thought he'd take care of it the next day. Well, it rained that night and all that mail was ruined. So we said, we're big enough, we need to have a post office here. So we applied to the postal U.S. government for a post office under the name of Masonville. And Masonville had already been taken in Iowa, eastern Iowa and Delaware County. So we decided that Mason City would be a good name, and that's what it's been ever since. That was 1857. We also had a, did I tell you about the church service? No, okay. The first church service was held in, that was back in 1855. And everybody was gathered, an itinerant preacher had come through, so they decided we'd have a service. Well, Sarah said, well, let's wait until John gets here. I hadn't showed up yet. And they heard a gunshot. Well, everybody looked out, and here I was coming down the road with a wolf slung over my shoulder. He'd been bothering the chickens, and I saw him running around the back of the property, so had to take care of that. I explained to the preacher that, well, you know, we can talk to God anytime, but when there's something like that happening, we got to take care of it. And he understood. So we'll go back past 1857 to 1858. We had a big shindig in town. We had a street dance. And all the ladies cooked up their best stuff, brought it in. We had a big meal. We had kids running around and a band playing with music for dancing. So that was a good thing. We had 200 people come to that dance, so things were really starting to move up. I was elected sheriff of the county in late 1860s, early 70s. And it was pretty peaceful town. Not much going on. An occasional fight that I had to break up or take care of. One time I arrested a fellow and he slugged me in the nose, broke my nose. Another time I used a billy club to break up a fight, and I hit this old guy, and he took me to court for assault and battery. Here he is, you know, fighting himself. You know, anyway, he won, unfortunately. But things were going really well for Mason City and this community. Eventually, Sarah and I decided we'd continue our adventure in a little town in Minnesota, Motley, Minnesota. Set up a general store up there. They had need of one. And that worked out pretty well until 1882, when I came down sick. Never did get much better, and in 1885 passed away in Motley. Sarah brought me back here. I've been sitting right here ever since. Excuse me. And really enjoy being in the town that I helped helped start. The reason that Sarah brought me back here was we had so much time invested here and really liked it. We also had children here. Maggie Shipley, her married name, decided that she wanted her mother closer to her. So she moved back, and the family kept on after that. Well, it's been a long story. I've been very successful in what I decided to do. I've done my adventuring. It was a big adventure, and if you think of the development of this area, a lot of people had their adventures. But I had a good life, from a cabin boy to a peddler to a store owner, a buffalo hunter. I actually went hunting with Dickinson and Hewitt, and just had generally a good time. I want you to think about coming out here sometime when the weather's nice. Well, the sun's coming out now. And just walking around and get a little exercise. Take a look at some of the stones, and you'll recognize a lot of the names from Mason City history. Think about those people and their stories, and reflect on your own story and how you'll be remembered. Your time. Thanks a lot for coming.
Miss Josephine Mabin, welcome to Elmwood-St. Joseph Municipal Cemetery. The most beautiful place to spend all of eternity. I was born in Wisconsin in 1859, and I died in Des Moines, Iowa in 1934. That's the first of my life and the last of my life, and there were lots of firsts and lasts in between, and I thank you for coming today to share a few of them with me. When I was a small child, my family moved to Iowa, McGregor, Iowa. Maybe you've heard of it. It's over there by the river. And I grew up there. My sister, Mary Farrell, and her husband moved to Mason City. When I was 17, I came to Mason City to live with my sister, and I was a school teacher at Centennial School. And I was a teacher for about 3 years. I met my future husband, Charles Mabin, while I was living here. Now, anyone who's ever gone through Garner, Iowa, maybe has heard of Mabin Avenue. Yes, it is that Mabin. My husband Charles and his father were the very first settlers in Hancock County. So we, of course, moved to Garner, Iowa, had 2 daughters, and lived there until 1882. At that time, we moved to Mason City, and I did all of the normal 1800 woman things. I took care of my children, I bowed to my husband, and I took care of his house. In 1886, my husband died, and he did not leave us very well off. I had to feed 2 children. Now, back in the late 1800s, women could be anything they wanted as long as they had never been married and had sex. You could be a teacher, but not if you'd had sex. You could be a nurse, but so here I am, kind of hard to hide. I have 2 children. I begged and borrowed, and I got a job as a bookkeeper at City National Bank. And I held that job for 10 years. In 1896, my boss ran under the Republican ticket and became the Sarasota County Treasurer, and he wanted me to be his deputy treasurer, and I entered public life for the very first time. My starting pay was $300 per year. I held that job for 4 years. In 1900, the Republican Party was looking for someone for recorder, and they came calling to me. Now, the other party had Mr. Stanberry for all eternity on my left. Well, for the very first time, the Mason City Gazette endorsed a woman for public office. And they said that I was so thoroughly professional, I had such an energetic personality, and so many well-connected acquaintances that I would serve the county and its citizens well. Now, I wasn't the first woman recorder in Sarasota County. That was in 1882, Miss Lizzie Finch. But I ran, and I won. And I beat Mr. Stanberry 2-1. Now, anyone who's familiar with the history knows that in 1902, there was a huge new courthouse going up there on Washington. And there was some talk going on. You know that Maven woman, she's probably gonna win. What are we gonna do with her in that courthouse? And they decided that I would have the same sized office and the same kind of furnishings as every other office there. And it was so noteworthy that my office was the same size, it made the papers. The only thing that was different about my office, besides the filing cabinets, was it smelled a lot better because there was no cigar smoking in my office. I served the county for 6 years, and my daughter Eleanor was actually my deputy recorder. When I retired from public office, I became, again, a bookkeeper and held that position for 10 years. One of the first things that I was in Sarasota County was I was the very first woman to sell real estate that I did not own to someone I did not know. Women traded real estate amongst, you know, if it was theirs, they could sell to family and friends. But I actually was the first female real estate agent in Sarasota County. In August 1920, Tennessee became the 38th state to ratify the 19th, adopt the 19th Amendment. It was ratified to the U.S. Constitution, and women deserved and earned and were granted the right to vote. Woohoo! Now, women in Iowa had been voting for years. Now, we could take care of their houses, and we could have municipal voting, they called it. We could vote for things, but we couldn't vote for people. Just didn't have it in us, they said. So the very first general election in Mason City in 1920, I got to vote. And what's for a person, but what is even better is the very first vote I ever cast for a person in my life. I cast for my daughter, Mildred Prescott, as recorder. And she won. How great was that? Guess who served as her deputy recorder? Me. Now, I like things nice and neat, and when I became a recorder, they had all these boxes in the corner. And I innovated the way you tracked deeds, the way you stored deeds, what you did with important papers, because you know, maybe the county'd be around for a little while and people might need this stuff. And it became very innovative. And during my lifetime, I was sought out to speak at conventions across the state and in neighboring states. In fact, I was instrumental in urging the Iowa State Legislature to actually standardize the duties and the salary, because back then, if you were a woman recorder, you were what? Paid less than the man recorder. And that was standardized by the Iowa State Legislature. If you were a recorder, you were paid the same, regardless of your sex. I was a charter member of the Business and Professional Women's Club of the Mason City chapter. Now, when they started this club, they thought, oh, you know, another one of those fancy kind of circles. We're gonna swap recipes, we're gonna learn how to keep our whites white and our colors bright. Wrong. First social and activism club for women in the country. All those names you heard in history of important women at the turn of the century Florence Nightingale, Clara Barton, Eleanor Roosevelt, Carrie Chapman Catt, all belonged to the Business and Professional Women's Club, and we started it here. I'm not the only strong woman in my family. My sister Mary, right here, was very good friends with May McNider. Maybe you've heard the McNider name in Mason. Well, my sister and May McNider wanted Mason City to be a better place for everyone, including women, and founded the Mason City Public Library. My two daughters, actually, served their entire life in public office. At a local level, you've learned that. At a state level, and my daughter Eleanor actually became a district supervisor in the Northwest for the federal government. One of the first management positions in the federal government was held by my daughter. Very proud. My granddaughter went back to the roots, and she was a school teacher in St. Ansgar and was one of the first married school teachers in St. Ansgar. I am so proud to have served the citizens of Mason City and to have been able to raise my daughters to be strong women. But what I am most proud of is that I accomplished all of this at a time when women, like children, were supposed to be seen and not heard. Thank you so much for coming. I hope you'll all join me for chili. And if you have any questions about my life or times, I'd be happy to answer them. And I hope you'll all stay for the evening walk because it's really fun. And some of my good friends are going to be here tonight.
Well, I'm certainly glad to see all of you here. We don't usually have so many visitors here in the cemetery. You know, it's a pretty quiet place. We were guaranteed peace and quiet when we bought the lot, I guess. So peace and quiet is what we have most of the time. My name is Matilda Russell, and I was born in 1813, 200 years ago. And if anybody had told me that I'd be standing here when I was 200 years old talking to you, I would have found that hard to believe. But here I am, so what can I say? I was born in Ohio. My mother came from England and she taught me nice manners. And my father came from Pennsylvania and he taught me to work hard. So that was a pretty good combination. It served me well. When I was 17, I married John Russell, and John Russell was a chair builder. And so I thought, this is a pretty good industry to have. He can make the chairs for our house and maybe some other things too. So he came from a long line of people who were American patriots. His grandfather had been in the Revolutionary War. He was a veteran of the Revolutionary War. He lived to be 104, so obviously the war didn't take all the ginger out of him. And his father was a real pioneer. John had been born in Pennsylvania, but then the family was moving west, always moving west, searching out the new land. And so he also moved to Ohio, and that's where I met him. Well, I married him when I was 17, and over the next 20 years, we had 10 children. When we only had 9 children, that idea of moving west caught up with us. And we heard that there was good land in Iowa. And so we packed up our 9 children and all our worldly goods into an ox cart and hitched it to 8 teams of oxen and started across Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, and then we came to what? The river. There were no bridges in those days. How did we get across?
When?
No. Ferry. Yeah, you could get across on a ferry. All the cattle, all the oxen, the cart, all of our family, and other families too. So, the river goes rather swiftly, so sometimes you start here and you're over there by the time you get off. So, it was, we landed in Jackson County, the first county on this side of the river. And we settled down, we started farming. We got a pretty good herd of cattle. We got another baby, 10 then. But, it's pretty hilly over there. And we'd heard that Saragordo County was flat and fertile. And we said, okay, let's go to Saragordo County. Well, by then we had 40 cattle. So I was driving the oxen, and my husband and the older boys were herding the cattle. And you can imagine, this is not an easy trip. This is not fast. Well, every night we would light a fire, cook our supper, bed down, and one night we couldn't find Sarah. She was 4 years old. Where was she? We called, we hollered, we sent the boys out in all directions. Along about dawn, one of them found Sarah curled up asleep with a stray cat in her arms. She'd been following this cat. When she finally found it, of course she was exhausted, so she laid down and went to sleep. Well, she got a pretty good scolding, I'll tell you. And she got to keep the cat. Well, we got to Saragordo County, and we decided to stake out a claim in Lime Creek Township, which is just up here on the edge of Mason City. That's Mason City now. We were one of only 3 families that was in Lime Creek Township. And my husband built a big log house for us. It was 32 feet across and about 20 feet wide, so it was like from that marker to that marker, and from those stones back there, a little bit beyond this one. A big house. Well, we had a big family. There were 12 of us, so we needed a big house. And things went along pretty well. Well, that first year was not so good. We had blizzard after blizzard after blizzard, and we lost about half of our cattle. But we were pioneers, and we built the herd back up. We plowed the fields. My husband and the boys worked on that. The girls and I planted the garden, took care of the chickens, milked the cows, took care of the food. Things were going pretty well. And then it was 1861. What happened? You know your American history? What happened? Civil War. All 5 of our boys enlisted. One boy had a shoulder injury from an earlier accident, and so they sent him home, but the other 4 went south. Only 2 came home. And at about the same time, one of our daughters died young. There's nothing harder for a mother than to lose her children. But we were pioneers. We had to take it. We had 7 kids yet that we had to take care of. And so, back to farming. Things went along pretty well, and before long we realized we were the old settlers. Yeah, Mason City was becoming a booming town. We lived quite close to the line between Lime Springs and Lincoln Townships, and so we were close to Wheelerwood, and we were close to the Red Mill. Wheelerwood is still there, I understand. The Red Mill, not so much. But I had seen, I still have a little bit about the Red Mill here, I think. We were getting old. We started the Old Settlers picnics, and we got together every summer with other old settlers. In 1880, there were 2,000 people, along with all their families. 2,000 people who came to the picnic over at Clear Lake. That was quite a deal. One of our daughters became a school teacher. She taught in a country school in Lincoln Township. She may have taught at the Sugar Beet School, though there was no sugar beet then. She may have taught at Freeman School, which was a nice big two-room country school. I kind of wish that she would have taught at Lime Creek number 6, because there was somebody around here who went to Lime Creek number 6 when she was little. I don't know who that was, but somebody, you know. And another daughter and her husband started the first drugstore in Mason City, so they helped the economy. And 2 of our sons stayed on the farms, and one of our sons still had that pioneering spirit. He wanted to go west, and so he went to Oregon, just about as far as you could go. Well, John and I moved off the farm. We moved into a nice house on East State Street, just this side of where the bridge is that goes across Willow Creek. And that's where we spent our last days. And we died without, within a few weeks of each other. I was at the ripe old age of 77, and John was not much older. And I thought it was really fortunate that we died fairly close to each other, because we'd been married 59 years and we'd kind of gotten used to being together. And I don't know if we'd have been able to get used to being alone again. So I think that it was fortunate that we both died in 1890. And I'm so glad that you're here today to hear my story. And thank you so much for coming. If you want any of these things, you're welcome.
Charge of the place. But being the only priest in the whole county, that didn't mean a whole lot. I guess I was my own boss. I was 40 years here. For the first 23 years, I was the only priest. Finally, for the reward of faithful service of 17 years, they sent me an assistant. Usually I had to rely on my altar servers. This is Patrick, another good Irishman, and he always took care of my horses. My biggest fault was I had a terrible fear of horses. Now this is kind of a bad thing in 1877. There's not a lot of ways to travel in northern Iowa except a horse. I had to go all the way from Mason City to Nora Springs, to Grafton, to Buffalo Center, to Carthage. All these 17 or 18 little towns all around the area. So I'd have my altar server hook up the horse, get the buggy ready, and he'd have to drive. The only thing I would do was hold on to my seat and try to read my writing so I could preach when I got there. Oh, take that horse over a little farther away. Thank you, sir. Well, I was ordained a little farther away in Carlow, Ireland, on May 26, 1877. And 5 months later, they put me here in Cerro Gordo County, Iowa. There I was to minister to my flock at St. Joseph's. Well, I was 33 years old. Well, Jesus was about that age when he did some pretty important stuff too, you know. And I made this journey, but not alone. My aunt, Mary Margaret, came with me. She was going to be my housekeeper and keep an eye on me. She promised that to my mother. So in this rough and tumble land, it was a bit of a difficult situation. We got here and they gave me a parish house, but it didn't have any furniture. There wasn't any heat. And I came in October, and so for the first week, my aunt and I slept in all our clothes we could find to stay warm. Well, Aunt Margaret had one great redeeming feature. She was one hell of a gossip. And she knew how to tell stories and steer stories, and so pretty soon all the faithful found out I didn't have a stick of furniture in my house. Well, by November, I not only had furniture and a bed, that was important, I also had heat. Oh, I was so toasty warm that winter. I was in heaven. But that's the way it goes. Winter was warm. This area was pretty rough in 1877. And by rough, I mean forested. There were trees everywhere. Never a good road, not like this Avenue of the Saints you have today. Well, we were living on the edge of a new day. Thomas Edison had just made his first electric light bulb. We had the new phonograph record, and in Connecticut, they had their first telephone directory. Of course, that was a long time coming to Mason City. Big changes were coming in the world. And you know, they even said about me in my obituary, he was one of the unique and interesting characters who linked the life of the pioneer days with the modernity of present times because of his mental grasp and progressive spirit. Was as much a part of the present generation as the pioneer days when he came as a young man to help blaze the way to a busy life that was the team of the virgin prairies and congregate in populous cities. Yeah, Buffalo Center, Rockwell, all those populous cities we know today. There were 26 Catholic families when I got here in Mason City. And by the time of my death, there were over 300 families in the congregation. We had a new church up on the north side before I died. But this expansion, you know, didn't happen just overnight. It was a lot of hard work. We had the ladies of the parish working on the circles and their societies, making every donation they could to cut corners. We built a school. The first school! I tell you, I was so proud of that. Unfortunately, it burned down about 3 years after it was built, and we had to start all over again. It's the way lots of life is. Well, we used to have the Junior Tabernacle Society, and they were a great help in fundraising. They held a 3-day fun festival, and we had women brought turkey, chickens, ducks, and geese, and hamsters. I don't think that was for dinner. It says they were 25 cents. That's not a lot of meat on a hamster. It was a big expense, 25 cents. $1 a day was all people made back then. Well, that's if you had a regular job. Priest, we didn't even make $1 a day. But I helped by selling my own special mineral water by the quart. $1.50. And it always went to building the new school. It was very popular with the gentlemen. Women were not allowed to watch. Well, I was pastor for 40 years, and I watched the families grow, did marriages, baptisms, and funerals. And when couples became engaged, well, back then we always announced it. We had banns of marriage because everybody needed to know in the congregation who was going to get married to make sure there was no problems coming up. And so we'd announce it in a loud, clear voice at church. Well, some people thought that was just a tad bit embarrassing. So if they put a little extra donation in the collection box, I wouldn't yell quite so loud. But we had to be happy. You know, as an Irish parish, you got to find the joy of God's Spirit or you're just not paying attention. We were busy. The citizens had nicknamed Mason City the Queen of the Midlands, and what a royal place it was. We had 3 services on Sunday, and every Sunday school we had Mass. During the day, we had 1 daily Mass a week, and the Amber and the Rosary Societies met once a month. In 1884, we were rolling in the money. Why, we had brought in $895.15 in collection that year. Whoa! I didn't know what to do with it all. And that included not only the offertory collections, but the pew rent, the baptism fee, the marriage fee, and the burial fee. Well, with that much money, I was pretty confident we could build a school. So that's when we started with that extra. And we had the Sisters of St. Francis from Clinton come down. We were truly blessed with them. But you know, as an Irishman coming over to America, I mean, it was difficult. When I was a kid, I spoke Gaelic. Then I went to school, I had to learn English. Then I went to the priesthood and I had to learn Latin. That's why I was 33 by the time I got here. And then I came here and I had to learn English all over again. I don't know what they spoke here when I got here. There were all these German immigrants, German Lutherans. There were very few Catholics back then. If there were, they were all over my Dubuque with French and so. But I knew this would be a populous place. This was going to grow and be a big city, and we could all be part of it. And it was a wonderful congregation because we felt that God was right in our midst. Being Irish, we knew God was in our hearts. And if we couldn't find him in church, we'd certainly find him at home. Students back then, they paid $100 a year for tuition. Now I know people, that sounds awfully high, but you have to consider that included food during the school year at noontime. It also included food at breakfast as long as the girls were there, because the girls were staying at the academy and they kept their breakfast and their supper. And we had banjo lessons for an extra $20 a year and oil painting lessons for an extra $8 a year. You have to cover your costs, even on these things. But if you weren't able to pay your tuition, we did take in-kind offerings. We had chicken, eggs, and butter would always come in on every week. And you could tell after a while, I did like the butter. We did keep a cow on the grounds at St. Joseph's. And we had fresh milk. We had a huge kitchen yard, which Aunt Margaret took care of in her spare time. And 1900, I remember that was the banner year, new century. My first assistant ever arrived from Ireland. And for 17 years, I was the dean. I had somebody else I could boss around fools. We needed more room. We built the present church over on the St. Joseph's Academy. It opened in 1901. It was amazing. My donation, I had saved up in the 22 years I was here, $1,000 to donate to the new church. The Globe Gazette wrote on my funeral that in the presence of a throng of the people from the city and country who more than filled the church, all of its aisles and vestibules, in the hearts of the many to whom the late dean had been so helpful and generous, and in the tears of the mothers and the children who loved me so, who had received so much consolation and instruction from their priest, now cold but calm and serene, with the hands folded for work well finished. I had gone, according to the Archbishop, to reap the harvest of the good life that I had lived. And here I lie. If they say you can't take it with you, so what the heck? Are there any questions? You know, I keep my notes here because the congregation really preferred it when I read my homily, because otherwise I've been known to have 30 to 45-minute homilies. And they say, even on a cold Sunday, Father, we'd like to get back into a nice winter stay. But it was a wonderful thing, and I thank my young altar server, Patrick, for taking the horse for me. We would go to Brit sometimes, and when we traveled to Brit, we'd have to get up and be on the 6 o'clock train to Brit. We'd say Mass, we'd stay with the family for the day, and we'd catch the train back at 7. So just one trip to Brit all day. That was amazing. So God be with you all, and thanks for coming. And may God bless you and be with you always. And remember, if you're Irish, God has already blessed you. Take care.
Good afternoon. Glad you could all make it. I left the spirit world to come out here this afternoon. Introduce myself. My name is Joseph Stork. People call me Father Joseph. And it's good to be out here with the living for a day. Good Iowa soil here is what I'm used to. I came out to this area, lived in the area around Clear Lake and Ventura for 46 years. Farmed it, good black soil. It was good to us, gave us a good living. And it was a good time to be alive. It was a tough time, but it was still a good time. But I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. The reason I ended up in Mason City was because when I passed, the cemetery over there did not allow we Catholics to be buried there because there was no blessed ground to the Catholics. But there was blessed ground in Mason City, and so that's the reason I wound up here. That's the reason they planted me here. But it wasn't all bad because I'm surrounded by the Irish. A lot of Irish here, which was nice, which was very nice. But going back a ways, I was born in 1826 in Germany, and 6 years later, my father family brought us over to Czechoslovakia, across the river, and my father disliked the German Confederation, the military, and so on. He wanted to get us out of there as fast as he could. So we ended up in Czechoslovakia. I was a freighter, a team driver for several years, but I really wanted to farm. So in 1856, we hopped a boat, hopped a ship, arrived in New York, found a stagecoach there, and rode it all the way to Wisconsin, Muscadet, Wisconsin, over in the southwest area of Grant County. We were fortunate. I bought 80 acres of land, paid $10 an acre, which was quite a deal in those days. My wife, Barbara, blessed us with 6 more children, which gave us 10. We lost one in Bohemia, but that's still quite a blessing. So we made do, we farmed, we worked hard, built a log cabin, which was an interesting experience in those days. And we decided, well, in 1871, Barbara had to leave us. She passed on, and we decided to move the whole kit and caboodle to Iowa, because we found out that we could buy 160 acres for $5 an acre. Try doing that today. It's a little rough. Part of that land bordered Clear Lake. We actually moved, when we moved out here, we settled overnight. We rested at Pine Tree Park. And it's just a short distance from where my great-great-grandson now lives now, which was interesting. We had several interesting experiences. There was a fellow there that eventually bought the 10 acres of land next to the lake. His name was Earl Ashley. He was a banker. One afternoon, his great-great-grandson was helping him paint a barn. Earl was quite thrifty, but he put on his old jeans, came out, and we were painting. And I said, Earl, I should say my great-great-grandson, said, Earl, if I ran into some money, where could I put it? Where would be a good place to put the windfall? He said, Clear Lake Federal Savings and Loan. And I said, why is that? He says, because I own it. So, that settled that one. In 1871, I married Kate Tusha, I believe that's not too hard to pronounce. And she blessed me with 6 more children. Had a hired gal come out to try to help me, but she turned tail when she saw all the work that had to be done. And so I married Kate. She's a wonderful woman and very, very, very studious. The learning was important. Schooling was important. We had a lot of values. We had simple pleasures. It wasn't the go-go world it is today. Once in a while, I still come down from the spirit world, look around, check everything, and I'm ready to go back. I mean, you know, after I've had a day or two, I'm ready to leave again. But it was just a situation where everyone helped everyone else because they had to. I mean, it was just that kind of a existence. You had pretty much had to do that. I had one son by the name of Tom that was quite a character. Tom, he grew up. He built a home just north of Garner, a couple of miles, and he got in trouble with the other farmers. His wife liked closets, so he decided to build his wife's closets, shelves, and so on. Anyway, they became the rage, and all the wives and the farmers around learned about the closets. And you can probably guess what happened. Hell hath no fury like that of a woman scorned. The women all got on their husbands to build them closets. So Tom had to lie low for a couple of years. He had to just kind of lie low. He used to visit his relatives, and he'd come back and he'd say, they were so glad to see me. Well, I think they were so glad to see him go, but he didn't make that big of an impression, but he had a lot of fun. We had simple pleasures. We played cards. There were barn dances, fiddles. Kids had simple toys. So it was a good life. It was a hard life. It was a very hard life. I shouldn't shortchange that. The winters were fierce. It was hard to keep warm. Get up in the morning, have to chip the ice. I'm just amazed. You go into these modern houses now, you turn a handle, you have hot water. This wasn't possible then. You had to heat the wood. You had to burn the wood to heat the water. You had to wait. The Saturday night bath was a luxury, but it was still wonderful. We had serious times. I ended up outliving both of my wives, and I lived to be 90 years old, which was quite a while for anyone. This is a matter of personal pride, but my last child was 58. I was 58 years old when I had my last child. How about that? Okay. There's an old story. just because there's snow on the roof doesn't mean the fire's out in the furnace. So, but I gave them my blood, my sweat, and my tears. And if there's any message here I'd like to deliver, it's family. Family is the most important thing you have. I lost count after 58 great-great-grandchildren. It was a wonderful life, full of hard work. We ended up owning 4 farms. Unfortunately, we didn't keep all the farms. We did have a thing called the Depression. But it amounted to 640 acres, which I was very proud of. Anyway, I do want to thank you for coming, and I hope you don't stop back soon, but I guess we'll all have to stop back someday. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Just look at you all. What a fine-looking group. I wish I could invite every one of you to my house for tea. Excuse me. Let me introduce myself properly. I'm Mary Owen. At one point, I was the person who had lived in Mason City the longest. I don't remember much about coming here. I was only a baby born in 1852. My family came to Cerro Gordo County in 1853, among the very first settlers here. I can tell you about those early years, but only because the stories were repeated so often. It was my mother, my father, A.C. Owen, my 2 sisters, and my brother that came in that ox cart from Rockford, Illinois. My parents set up tents for us to live in, while my father laid the local stone for our log cabin. He was making good progress on it too, until we were driven away by the rampaging Sioux Indians. That was July of 1854, I believe. We fled to Cedar Falls until it was safe to return. But return we did, and Father finished that log cabin near what would soon become Owens Grove. That was near what would become Portland in 1878 when the railroad came. My, we must have felt isolated, as our nearest neighbors were 10 miles away. My mother, Lorinda, was a brave, strong woman. In September of 1854, my father had to walk back to Rockford, Illinois, to borrow money for the land he wanted to buy, and then he had to walk to Des Moines to purchase it. While he was away, my mother would stand guard over us and the livestock with an iron rod for protection against the wolves. There was a group that came here from Portland: John Long, John McMillan, George Brentner, and my family. Actually, Father was gone a lot. He carried the first mail here from Cedar Falls, walking the whole way on snowshoes. He was also a land surveyor for all of the new land as more people began settling here. And Independence was the best place to go for supplies. Another long trip. One of the worst stories I recall being told happened when I was only 3 years old. 2 men had come to Owensboro to prepare homes for their families to move to Iowa. It was nearly Christmas when they set out with 3 yoke of oxen in search of lumber to build a stable. The weather was fine when they left, but as they were cutting timber, a violent storm blew up. They left for home but got lost in the storm. At one point, they abandoned their oxen sled and began heading on foot. They were found 3 days later, both frozen to death. My father and 3 others that had been following their dim trail believed that at one point they were within 2 miles of home, but one was found 14 miles away. Someone went to Mason City in search of coffins, but there was such a shortage of lumber in the area, they had to build them out of a store counter that Judge Long donated. Both men left behind young families that had not yet come to Iowa. I guess my parents didn't like the first place, because they built another log cabin and we moved about 1.5 miles north of Mason City. My parents liked the good spring water they found there. I liked it too. The stagecoach would sometimes stop at our house and pass through the country before continuing on along the trail. But we moved again in 1867 to a place that was fast becoming a real town. My father was town marshal. That reminds me of another terrible time. It was 1874, and Rachel Clayton and L.A. Winthrop, the father of her baby, were put on trial for abortion. I don't think you'd call it that today. I think you'd call it murder of a newborn. Their dead baby was found at the Allen House livery. The trial went on and on. At the time, my father had to guard and board prisoners, and that included holding Winthrop for 11 days. Rachel was from Mason City, and he from Charles City, where his trial was held. What a scandal that was. My own life was quite serene. Father died in 1892, and mother in 1918. My brother Robert, his wife Melvin, and family lived on the southwest corner of Washington and State. He worked as a paper and paper hanger. I also had another brother, Mark, who was born after we came to Iowa. I myself never married, but I found plenty to do. I cared for my parents in their last years. In 1940, I was interviewed by the Globe Gazette as the oldest living pioneer resident of Mason City. When I died in 1944, I was 92 years old, and I had lived 91 and a half of those years right here. My obituary was so kind. They called me truthful, unpretentious, refined, and thrifty, pointed out my keen sense of humor, as well as my hospitality and friendship with so many people. I tried to be that. My favorite quote was from Ralph Waldo Emerson. He wrote, "To have a friend, you must be one." 91 years here. Believe me, I saw a lot of changes. From ox carts to automobiles to airplanes. From a place where you couldn't see another house or barn around to a thriving city. Just thinking about it all makes me a bit tired. Thank you all for coming. Do you have any questions?
Very good.
Well, good evening to you all. Thanks for coming here to see Timothy O'Brien. That's me. Sounds like a good Irish Catholic name, wouldn't you say? Well, that's to be expected. This here's the St. Joseph part of the cemetery. Now, I've led a pretty rough life. Had some good times and bad. I was 19 years old, living in McGregor, Iowa, there on the Mississippi River in Clayton County, when I decided that I would go ahead and join up in the big war that was happening here back in 1862. So I joined the 17th Iowa Volunteer Infantry, Company I it was. Now, I was a big, brave Irish lad, and I was going to tell those Confederates what's what. That's what I was going to do. Now, war's a different thing than what you think it is. They gave us all the big celebrations, and we thought we were really brave, but we was scared of being cowards. Well, I mustered in, first went up to Minnesota for training, then down to Cairo, Illinois, and then down south to where the action was happening. That's the best. But I'm not going to start over. So down we went to the war. Louisiana, Mississippi, Tennessee. Served in a lot of different corps. I served under General Sherman, under General Marcus Canby. Took a bullet in my left arm. Spent some time in a field hospital. Now I'll tell you right now, there's something about a war that isn't like anything else. And I don't like to talk much about what I saw, but I saw some terrible, terrible things. I was glad to be coming home when that day came. So, thought I'd be back in McGregor with a little bit of a pension from my war wound, and thought, time to start a good life for myself. So, I got married, thought I'd be settling down. My young wife, she died. I don't like to talk much about that either. But, not long after, I met Maria Cross. She was a pretty lass, I'll tell you. She was just 16 to my 24. I couldn't believe how fortunate I was that I'd finally have an opportunity for a good life. So, we got married, settled down, started a family, had our son John, our daughter Mary. And then we thought, maybe there's even a better place for us to have a better life. There's a city not too far west from here that's really bustling, really growing, Mason City. Let's go there. The industries were growing here, the railroad had come, and this really was a great place for raising a family and getting a good start. So we moved to Mason City. Made a lot of friends, really became part of the community, really came to love it. And I found a good job, working for the Chicago, Milwaukee, and St. Paul Railroad as a special police agent. They liked my military experience and the fact that I knew how to handle a gun, and I wasn't afraid to use it. See, back in those days, we had a lot of trouble with tramps coming in on the trains, causing trouble and raising a ruckus. Sometimes violence would occur. Sometimes there'd be train robberies. So it was a pretty serious job, and an important one. And I took it serious, too. Well, I'd been working for some years, and I was 50 years old when it all happened on October 2nd, 1893. Seemed like it started out like any other morning. Got there early, around 4:30. And just as I'd gotten there, I saw freight number 63 coming in with a couple of tramps. It jumped off one of the flat cars. So I made out for him. Managed to grab him, but one of them got away, dodged between a couple of cars, and he was gone. So I took the other one into the freight office, meant to find out what he was up to. So I told him I was going to search him. He wouldn't let me, so I pulled the gun on him and told him to hold still. That was a fatal mistake, I'm afraid, because he was too quick for me. Grabbed my gun and ran out the door. Well, I went out after him. I wasn't going to let some miscreant run around Mason City with my gun. So I told him to stop. He turned around and said if I didn't stop, he'd shoot. Fired a couple of bullets at my feet, but I kept coming. Then I saw him raise the gun to his eye and fire. Felt like a cannon hit me in the chest, and I went down. But I wasn't going to let that miscreant get away, so I stood up with all the strength I had in me and yelled for someone to come and help and arrest this man. And then I fell again. But I wasn't going to get up again after that. Now my memory's kind of fuzzy about this now, but I figure I lay there about 15 minutes or so, then I slowly bled to death. Now the tramp, when he saw that I'd been hit, he dropped the gun and he ran away. Last I heard, someone had seen him running past the viaduct. Young Johnny Cross, he was a train boy. He was there, and he saw everything that happened, and he ran over to give me help. The tramp brushed by him as he came over. He called for Peter McGuire, my friend, who came and told Johnny to go run for Dr. Stockman. John Turner, he was one of the conductors and he was registering in the depot, heard the whole thing. There were a couple of baggage handlers that saw everything too. So we had a pretty good description of the shooter. He said he was wearing a dark felt hat, that he was wearing a long coat, buttoned straight up all the way to the neck, that he had a beard, a kind of a light beard, but he was kind of dark appearing with a mustache. So they had a pretty good description of him, and they started looking for him right away. Well, things started happening pretty quick. Soon, there was an organized posse. Mr. E.M. Randall got about 100 men together, and they started going all out through the city and into the county looking for the shooter. They pulled some scamp in from Norris Springs, not the guy. They found a guy over at the depot in Clear Lake and brought him over. He didn't fit the description, but they were pretty sure that he was the other guy that got away from me. They grilled him pretty hard, but he wasn't talking. They had to let him go because they knew he was not the one who did it. Well, right after that, they held an inquest and got a jury together so that everybody could say what they saw. It's kind of funny when you think about it now. Because they got everybody in there, and Dr. Stockman was there, and he said that there was a bullet lodged between my third and fourth rib, and that I slowly bled to death, leading to my expiration. So the jury decided, miraculously, that I had died at the hand of persons unknown. Now, why do you think they needed a jury and an inquest to figure that out? It was pretty obvious to me. Now, of course, all these things I'm remembering now, you know, I happened after my days on Earth. But, you know, when you're here, you kind of have a funny way of being able to do that. I can't describe how it works, but you're just going to have to take my word for it. Now, the next day, the railroad sent 5 detectives down, and they also offered a $500 reward to the one who would bring that shooter to justice. And so, next thing you know, every farmer, every kid, every person in the state is looking for tramps to bring in. They find a guy down in Postville, all the way down in southern Iowa, and brought him up. Not the guy. A couple others they tried, but they could never find someone that fit the description. Everybody had an alibi. Well, after a while, they kept looking. They kept looking, and the headlines were crazy every day in the Globe-Gazette, and in the Mercury, and in the other papers in the neighborhood. It'd say things like, "Still at large." And then the next one would say, "Murdered, found." But the next day it was, "He is not the man." And then, "Coils are tightening." And all these crazy things going on from day to day. It's pretty funny when you think about it now, because there's just so much attention, so much excitement, but no resolution. After a while, things died down, and they never found that guy. If you ask me, he probably caught the first freight he could going north to Minneapolis or thereabouts, and got out of here as quick as he could. Well, Maria was ill at the time I died. But she held up pretty well, and I'm pretty proud of how well she did. My children, they were all grown up by that time, thank the Lord. And they'd moved on to their own careers and lives. Maria lived for another 26 years here in Mason City. She was very active at the church at St. Joseph's, and she was part of the Women's Relief Corps, helping the veterans who had come home from the Civil War, and then even the war that we had in Cuba there back in the 1890s. So I'm pretty proud of her. So we had some good times in between the rough times, and it was good to be here in Mason City, a great town. Well, that's the story of Timothy O'Brien, and I'd be happy to answer a question or two if you've got one. I don't know if I'll know the answer, because I wasn't a historian, if you know what I mean. But if I can help you out, I'd be happy to do so. Anyone? Where were you killed? I was killed out in front of the CM&SP depot, which is today, I believe you call it the DM&E depot, right off of Pennsylvania Avenue, the end of Pennsylvania.
Why are you here? I've been here mad since 1913. Mad, mad, mad. Look at this. At rest. James Jenkinson. Well, he shouldn't be at rest. It should say over here, at rest, Mary Reagan Jenkinson. 1847 to 1930. Where is it? I'm there. Go read the cemetery. I'm there. And no one even knows. Well, I don't know if they were still mad at me or not. Maybe. It's hard to tell after all these years. You know, I was born in Indiana, and I was living there with my 3 brothers, and everything was fine until that darned war came along, and my brothers, all 3 of them enlisted, went off to fight for the Union, to fight those Confederates. Well, our parents were gone. There was nothing for me in Indiana, but I had a sister here in Forest City, and my brothers arranged for me to come and stay with her. Well, that was all fine and good, but her husband had gone and enlisted too. And so there she was. No money, kids, but she did have his family there helping look after her. For me, nothing. But I heard there were jobs in Mason City. So I found my way over here. And sure enough, I found a job at the Eureka Hotel, washing dishes, cooking, cleaning, ironing. And the war went on, and went on, and went on. Now, I'm Mary Reagan. I'm an Irish background lass. And do you know what I like more than anything else? A little fun. Anybody here know an Irish jig? You know a good Irish jig? Do one with me? What do you think? Well, of course, in 1862, and 1863, where were all the young men to do Irish jigs with? Not here. They were in Vicksburg. They were in Georgia. They were all over except here in Mason City. So I worked away, had some girlfriends, really wasn't having much fun. Finally, the news came that the war was over. We celebrated like you would not believe. Celebrated in the streets. Girls, women, boys, old men. Celebrated in the streets. Well, we calmed down, went back to work. Wasn't long, I was working in the hotel. It was April, and I was ironing. And I don't know if you know what ironing was like in 1865. Those heavy iron things you had to be heating over a hot stove, and heating over the hot stove. I was sweating, I was mad, I was tired, and in walks my least favorite person in the whole world. This old lady came every day. I swear she came just above me. She had the whiniest, worst voice that you can imagine. And she'd say anything to get my goat. Well, that day she came in, leaning on her cane, her nasal little voice, and she says, "Guess what?" And I said, "What?" "They shot Lincoln. He's dead." I don't know what got into me. I have no idea what got into me. I was hot, I was tired, I was unhappy, and I hated that woman. And I turned to her, stomped my foot. You know, I had a lot of that sassy Irish in me. And I said, I'm glad. I hope one of my brothers shot him. She looked at me as though the world might end any moment and went tearing out as fast as an old lady with a cane can tear. And out she was in one. Well, I worked on that day. And then my friend met me to walk me home to our boarding house. And I'm talking to her. She's my best friend. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, came 20 girls and women running out of houses and out of storefronts, yelling, "Hang Jeff Davis from a sour apple tree!" And they grabbed me and they dragged me down to Willow Creek. They had all heard what I had said, thanks to that old gossip. So, what do they do when you get to Willow Creek? They proceed to dump me in the river. Held my head under there till I thought I was going to explode. And then they pulled me back up. And they put me back under. And then they pulled me back up. And then they pushed me back under. It was April. It was cold. Hadn't been ice out of that creek for a long, long time. Maybe 4 weeks. So at any rate, I'm shaking and I'm shivering and I'm crying. And he said, "Please, please." And they forced me down on my knees. Down onto my knees. And they make me say, "I pledge my loyalty to the Union. I promise I will be ever faithful to the Union." Now you'd think that would have been enough, right? Nope. They grabbed me up off that ground. I could get up easier there myself then than I can now. They grabbed me up off that ground and they hauled me back to the hotel, still yelling, "Hang Jeff Davis from a sour apple tree." And they were resolved to tar and feather me and cut my hair off. That was what they kept saying they were going to do. So we got to the hotel, and they grabbed this black stuff, and they smeared it all over my face and on my neck. And do you know what? While the women were doing this, the men had lined the street and were laughing all the way. Well, they had gathered around in the hotel and were still laughing their fool asses off. Well, fortunately for me, when they got that black stuff on me, I passed out cold. And that stopped everything. So I woke up to find myself alone, wet, black, still scared to death. I went home and cleaned myself up. And for quite some time, nobody in Mason City would say a word to me. Now, I didn't hate Lincoln. I wasn't glad Lincoln was dead. I was just really mad that day. So, my advice to you is watch what you say and when and how you say it, because it can get you in big trouble. Now, it wasn't but the day after this happened to me that we got another scare. A group of Confederate raiders came roaring through town on their horses, yelling, shouting, shooting in the air, and all our men went scurrying off to their houses and grabbed their guns and went to the stables to get their horses and rode out after them. Fortunately, they never caught them, because I'm afraid there would have been some bloodshed if they had. You know, it was sort of like Quantrell's Raiders, that kind of group. Now, I don't think this was the group that had Cole Younger and Frank James riding with it, but they did that kind of thing in Missouri. This was just a renegade group of Confederates, not knowing what to do now that they didn't have anybody to fight. Well, in August, the men started coming back, and I met one of them. His name was Jamie Jenkinson. He was one of the very first settlers here in Mason City. He came with John. And John went back to his home and to get his wife and more supplies. And Jamie stayed here that whole first long winter. It was a tough one. He enlisted and he went from private to corporal. He fought at Vicksburg. And then he was captured at the Battle of Pleasant Hill in Louisiana. But after the war, he was released, came back, met me, and we were married. And I thought we lived quite happily. Now, he died 10 years before I did. And I don't know, maybe they were still mad at me in Mississippi. Or maybe there was just no one here who cares. That makes me sad. Makes me real sad. But mostly I'm mad. Mad because it doesn't say Mary Rankin Jenkinson right there. I'm going to pout.
Good evening.
Hi.
How are you tonight? Thank you so much for coming out. I would like you to introduce myself. My name is Lottie Thomas Hughes. I am the widow of Edward Hughes, who lays before you. But I have a story to tell. I want to tell my side of the story. I want you to hear my side of the story. You see, I'm accused of murdering him. Yes, murdering him. Me. Do I look like a murderer? No. No. So here's my story, and this is where it begins. Edward and I, and our son Vern, and Mary Babcock, we were all staying at Mother and Father Hughes's home one winter while they were away south, taking care of their home. Well, one night they returned, which was fine. Everything was going good. Spring was around the corner. I was outside. We were over to the neighbors, the Goads. You'll hear me talk about the Goads. I was learning to ride a bicycle, and Edward was showing me how. Vern, he was over to the neighbors playing, the Goads, you know. All right. Well, Mother Hughes decided to go home and start dinner. She called for us, and we started home. Edward was telling me that his stomach was ailing him. He had that every so often. Well, once we got home, we had some salts in the cupboard. You know, everybody keeps salts. We had some salts and some water, and I gave him some to help his pain. I spooned it to him, and he drank it down. A little bit left, so I decided I'll finish it off. So, once we were all finally sitting around at the table, Edward started to feel terrible. He started to get up, said that he was kind of blind, couldn't see. He was numb, not having any feeling. Well, and he was shaken, just shaken terrible. So Mother and Father Hughes helped him up, walked him over to the living room. Well, he just collapsed right in front of our front door. Well, we ran over to the Goads, had them call the doctor. The doctor came, and as soon as he got there, Edward had one last spasm and passed on. We were just all amazed, all in shock that our dear Edward was gone. Well, the mortician came. You know, he came out to the house. And to our surprise, he put Edward right on the kitchen table. Right on the kitchen table, can you believe it? He was going to embalm him right there on the spot in front of us. Well, he said, empty out his pockets and take the clothes that you need. So which we did. And he started to embalm Edward. He happened to make the comment that Edward's arteries were very, very small, and he had some trouble, but he would do the best that he could. Well, after Edward was gone, I tried to get some rest. You know how it is, it's so hard to sleep and relax when something like that is going on. So I went up to Mother and Father Hughes's room, and I asked them nicely if I could come in, just to be comforted and have some company, which of course I did. Well, the next day was Edward's funeral, and it was huge. It was beautiful. There were tons and tons of flowers, and tons of people. Everyone knew Edward and me. Everyone. You know, one time Edward was a farmer. You know, a hard-working farmer. Then he decided to give up farming. And he was going into plumbing. Going to be a plumber around the town. But he also dealt with windmills. So, started out his own business and was doing very, very well. So you knew he had to know a lot of people. Well, after the funeral, we went back home. And you know how it is, you try to carry on as normal as possible, which it's tough anyway. Well, one night, Father Hughes came up to me and said, I was going to have to leave. Leave? What would I do? Why? I got no explanation, no reason why I had to leave. And take Vern with you. Well, I packed up and moved. We went over to my parents' house, and they lived in Rock Falls, which of course isn't too far from Mason City. Stayed there for a while. And I wasn't there long. And then I heard Father and Mother Hughes were going to dig Edward up. Dig him up, can you believe it? Well, which they did, and it was against the law. They did that, and they had his stomach removed and his heart removed and sent it off to Chicago. Chicago! Ah. Well, the test results came back, and it said both his stomach and his heart contained cyanide. He was poisoned. So, they came and arrested me for the murder of Edward. I was in shock. Just in shock. Didn't know what to do. Well, I got a good attorney. And you know, Father Hughes and Mother Hughes, they thought I was gonna inherit a lot of money and the farm. So you kind of think maybe they had something to do with the whole thing. Or the goats. They heard I was gonna get some money. So, they concocted a story. A story. Yep. Jesse said that he and I had a little thing. Yep. He said we had a little thing. And we didn't. We didn't. But they did ask me if I was ever alone with him. I said yes, I was once. I was once in the bedroom moving a nightstand. And that was all. He had claimed he had kissed and hugged me. Oh, are you kidding? Jesse and I wouldn't let him near me. But I must admit though, I might have flirted a time or two. Just a little. Just a little. So, there was that story. I didn't know what to do. So, my attorney was protecting me though. He knows that Father Hughes admitted he saw me drinking the rest of the salts. Uh-huh. I drank out of the same glass Edward did. And I didn't die. So, right there you know I didn't do it. So, well, they did say, the doctor, they questioned the doctor. He said they do make a tonic water that has cyanide in it for medicinal purposes. So, I mean, that is possible. It's very possible. So, the judge had a nice story and conversation with the jury. It was Judge Claggett. Yep, good fellow. Very good fellow. Said we came from a good family, a wholesome family, a well-liked family, and respectable. So, I was found not guilty. I was so relieved. So relieved. Knowing, they know, that I didn't do it. I didn't do it. So, now, Vern and I, we can walk downtown with our heads held high, knowing that we are free and not guilty. But you know, I see people looking and staring and pointing, wondering what they're thinking. See that lady? She killed her husband. See that woman? She murdered her husband. Well, now you all know that I didn't. Don't you? Yes. And we're all so relieved. I'm so glad you came tonight to hear my side of the story. You see, Edward, he can rest in peace. I can rest in peace. Have a good evening.
Wedge is the name of my second ex-husband. I was married twice. It didn't particularly work out either time. You know how those things go. The year is 1918. I've lived in Mason City for about 20 years now. I have a hired man named Frank Camardo living in the house with me. He's lived here for about 3 years. You see, I've amassed quite a real estate empire over the years. It's currently worth $150,000, with holds in 2 states. But I live in Mason City because my daughter, she lives right down the way from me, and my granddaughter stops by to visit me often. It is the highlight of my day when she comes to see me. Other than that, my daughter's family and my ex-husband's, the only living relative I have at this time is my brother, but he lives in South Dakota. I don't see him often at all. January 12th. It was a typical Saturday. It was cold out, as I remember, and there was snow on the ground. I heard a knock at the door, so I let him in. Now let me explain one thing to you. I am not a small woman. At 225 pounds, my doctor says I am very healthy for a woman my age. 54 years old, that is. So I let him in. We start to argue. Tempers start to flare, mine included. Then the nerve of this man, he goes to my kitchen, grabs my kitchen knife and starts stabbing at me. Well, I am a fighter. And the attack, it's nothing terribly serious at first. I think he's just trying to scare me. I'm going to fight back because I cannot wait to tell police just who this man is and what he has done to me. We struggle throughout the entire main level of the house for quite some time until we end up in my bedroom at the back of the house. That's when things take a turn for the worse. He slashes my throat, but I am still a fighter. I am not giving up that easy. I struggle to my feet, and just when I think I have a chance, I'm going to get the best of this man, I'm going to overpower him, he picks up a pickaxe and leaves a fist-sized blow in the back of my head, right behind my left ear. That's the last thing I remember. Well, according to the reports, The man took his time cleaning up afterwards. He went back into my kitchen, washed my blood off his hands in my sink, and dried them on my beautiful new kitchen towels. The nerve of him! Then he searched my house. I'm not really sure why, though, because everybody who knew me knew I didn't keep much of my money laying around. Well, when he was done with that, he came back to the bedroom where my body was lying lifeless. He set fire right by my body, tossed the knife in a stove, locked the door behind him, buried the bloody pickaxe in the white snow in my backyard, and then he was gone. The calm of this man after just having murdered me. He even locked the door. While the fire wasn't quite raging, and my beloved granddaughter stopped by, when thank goodness the door was locked, I would have hated for her to come in and see that scene. My body bloodied, burning, dead. She did see the smoke, though, coming from the house, so she raced home to tell her mother. My daughter then called the fire department, and around that exact same time, guess who else was calling the fire department? Frank Camardo, the hired man. About an hour later, he went to the police station. He figured they'd want to talk to him about this, considering he lived with me. He told his story. He said he was out shopping and came home with some bundles of food. He said at first he went to the front door, but it was locked, so he had to go around back. Then he says he came in and he says he was terrified when he saw me laying there. So he ran to the east side of the house, broke a window, yelled for help to the neighbors to call the fire department. A little bit later, though, his story changed. He says he went in the front door, which at first he said he couldn't do. Then he says he went and called for help and broke a window on the opposite side of the house from what he had originally said. The stories weren't quite adding up. That's when police said he was a suspect. Oh, but Frank says he was innocent. In fact, he even said he was going to stay in jail until the grand jury charged him because he wanted everyone to know that he was innocent. The coroner report came in shortly after that. No surprise here. I was murdered. The cause of my death? That pickaxe blow to the back of my head. Frank was charged with the crime in February. His trial began on March 11th. Now, this was 1918. The jurors were all men. They picked a jury in no time at all. Not like it is these days. Well, the state presented their evidence. It was all circumstantial. Frank says that he was with the Lieutenant of the Salvation Army at the time of my death, Lieutenant Edward LaPlante. Mr. LaPlante says, and he testified this, that he can pinpoint to the exact time that he was with Frank. He says it was 4:30 p.m. He says he knows this because it was at the time the fire engines started blaring by the street. Of course, those fire engines were on their way to my burning house. A carpenter also testifies. He lived by me. He says shortly before the fire department arrived, he saw a man running through my backyard. He says he thinks it was Frank Camardo. When Frank had originally gone to the police station in January, they had seen what looked to be blood on the front of his jacket. But his lawyer was somehow able to prove that it wasn't. The jury started deliberating at 3:30 on Wednesday afternoon. And right after lunch on Friday, they said they had their verdict. They had voted 27 times. And then they read their verdict. Innocent. Now, as you know, sometimes the justice system works, sometimes it does not. This time, I'll let all of you be the judge. Did justice prevail in my case? Oh, 'cause that man, I will never forget his face, because... Oh, wait a minute. Is that him? Over there? Hey, mister, do you remember me? Oh, because I certainly remember you. As you can see, lots of unanswered questions here. Does anybody have any questions? I'll be happy to try to answer them for you. You know, that I'm not quite sure of. I believe it was a nicer part of town, I would imagine. She had some money, obviously. I'm envisioning a larger house as well. An interesting, a gruesome crime for that time. Between the burning and the pickaxe.
Was her first husband?
Who was her first husband? That I am not sure of either. She was not married at the time though, living alone, which I imagine why the hired man was living there too.
Where'd the hired man go?
You know, I don't know. If I was him, I wouldn't have stuck around. He was found innocent. He was free to do as he pleased. I'm not sure if he stayed around or not. One question I was wondering is why there was a pickaxe in the bedroom. Maybe the man brought it in. Maybe it was there for protection. Who knows? I imagine not a lot of people keep pickaxes in their bedrooms.
Did they find the pickaxe then?
It was buried in the backyard in the snow.
So
He had dropped it, I believe, as he was exiting, yes. Yes. One of those things they'll probably never know what happened in this case, but...
What happened to your dress? Sure.
Oh, hello. Didn't expect to see such a crowd here. Unusual for this place. But then again, I've experienced the unusual before, you know. My name's Ned. Edwin, really. Hansford. And I'd like to tell you about my successful life here in America. At least that's what I came here seeking. Came here from a little town in Dorset called Bridport. Born October 1875. Pa's name was Richard, and Ma's name was Mary. Mary Symes Hansford. Dorset sits on the coast of southern England, on the English Channel. Just a hop away from France, you might say. There wasn't a whole lot for me to do and to make a living in England, or in Dorset, Bridport, except fishing and making rope. In fact, in England, quite a bit of rope is made in Bridport. There's an old saying, stabbed with a Bridport dagger. But it has nothing to do with the dagger. It means hanged with a rope, made in Bridport. I came here with my brother Will, Frederick William, who was about 28 or 29 at the time. We never married, and we were both bachelors. We came with our sister, Mary Helen. We called her Nellie. She was a few years younger than Will. She married George Butcher, who lived on a farm just south of Mason City. Both died after I did. Nellie in 1938, and Will in 1944 at the IOOF home. He lived there and worked as the cook. Bridport was an old town. An old castle there too. But just the front of it. They built it, they fixed it up, and then burned down shortly after I was born. And then they built it up again, and I guess it's still there. They had a corn market at Buckydew Square. They even had an old St. Andrew's Chapel, but I never saw it. They built our town hall and market house right on that spot. There are 3 rivers that come together in Bridport, and that's what makes it such a good fishing port. After I got settled and had a little money, about 8 years, I went into farming on my own. I owned 140 acres just south of Mason City. Rented it from Mr. Brett. I had a house, a barn, and even a windmill. It was a pretty nice place. I had to fence the farm and even had a hired hand. His name was George Youst. Mr. Brett owned land all around Mason City. By the time I was renting, his son was managing most of their properties. And the old man was just spending summers here and winters in California. They owned land in 5 different states. Then came that day, July 1907. It was the 14th of that month at about 1 o'clock in the morning. A big storm had just rolled through on Saturday night, and it looked like to George and me as if we might be in for a tornado. So we headed to the basement. I had taken a lantern down with us too, and had just set it on top of a box when wham! Last thing in my life was that wham. Lightning hit the house. Big thunderbolt with it too. Followed the chimney right down to the basement. Right down to me. It was just over in an instant. Crazy thing. I'd never heard of anybody getting struck by lightning in their basement. Didn't think nothing of it at the time. Poor George was standing in a pool of water, which might have saved him. He was still stunned though. It took him a bit to recover. He ran to the neighbor house of John Stevenson and called for help. He even called Nellie, who'd lived just a little bit away. J.J. Burns brought Doc Swale over to examine the body. They found me sitting in the corner. A big red mark just on the top of my forehead, just above the hairline. Not another mark on me. They found a hole in the floor where the lightning bolt ended. Dr. Carlton came out to examine the body, but wasn't needed. Anybody could see I was dead. So they took my body back to Nellie's house, and Dr. Carlton conducted the funeral on Monday morning. It was hard on Will and Nellie, having left our family in England. We were pretty close. But Nellie had a good life. She and George had 5 daughters and 5 sons, so the family line went on. It's just none named Hansford. What with Will and me both bachelors. Did you know that the average person in this country getting struck by lightning is 1 in 500,000? Maybe 40 to 50 people a year die by lightning. I'm willing to bet that not very many were standing in their basement when it happened. I told you I experienced the unusual. I should have stayed in Bridport making rope. Thank you.